Remember me and you and me. No matter how we toss the dice, it meant to be. The only one for me is you, and you for me. So happy now together. And they say the world will end and all is lost. I only wanna feel again my lover's touch. Desperately I'm waiting for when we'll be happy together.
We are all up there looking for like a solution in the heavens, a big story, God and all that, but we fail to look low enough. Carl Jung says the reason why the modern man cannot see God is because he does not look low enough. And so Joyce wrote a novel called Ulysses, the best novel in the English language, written by an Irishman. James, how's that sound? So Joyce wrote that great novel, and the plot of the novel is very interesting. He chose one day in Dublin City, and he just went through every single piece of that day and wrote like a massive fat book about it. And it's a really, really hard book to read because it's so complicated. And what he did is he takes something like, the main character goes to a funeral during that day, and he shows how that funeral is like a mythic representation of every funeral that has ever happened. And it's also a mythic representation of every great moment where something has gone down into the underworld. And it's been a confrontation with the god of death, Hades. Name of the chapter is Hades. And so as, they're lowering the coffin down, that's that descent into the dark, cold underworld. And it's all present. And if you think about it, like, we go to these funerals nowadays and we're sort of just going through the motions. We're just standing there and our left brain's ticking on, blathering to itself, being like, all right, when will this be over? Oh, I'm kind of a bit hungry. Oh, there's all the family, be nice. All this type of thing. But in that moment, the reason why we did those rituals in the past is because they were trying to connect us to an archetype, the archetype of death. Like, this is it. This will happen to you someday. Someday this will be you. This is all of our eternal fate. And each time you're there, you can sort of meditate on it. You can be with it. You can be with the energy, if you will. Like in graveyards, there's an energy. And when you're present in it, it's important to feel it in some sense. Allow the mythic right brain to feel it. Allow that left brain to shut up for a while. Because the left brain can only see categories. This is a cemetery. It's like just this little blunt sentence. Disenchanted, dead sentence. Bring a child into a seminary and tell them that inside each of those little humps is a skeleton. And they'll be like, what the fuck? That's so weird. And they'll be like, try to climb up your leg. Or they'll do something more insane, like dance on it or something like that. But do you know what I mean? There's more magic in them because they've never seen that before. But you've seen it so much that you've become bored. But it's still possible for you to find magic in it. The reason why you're bored is because you can't see the color in this stuff. And I would hypothesize that this left-brained attitude we have towards the world is vulnerable to. I shill for the right brain. The right brain is the side, the imaginative side of our world that understands how colorful things in. This is the side of your mind that is able to perceive, perhaps, the idea a lot better that not only are you standing looking at a grave, but you're looking at the god of death claiming another victim, and he waits there for you as well. And there's this ever-present set of ideas that run underneath us that sort of make up our life. In Ulysses, like Joyce shows how this one character goes through most of the major things that we go through. Sorrow, pain, love, hope, despair, hunger, all these type of things. And it's, in some sense, every person we share so much experience with. And things like myths, the big stories, when they're created correctly, are actually our way of connecting with that shared experience. That's almost what they are. They're like the distilled version of individual experience into this collective dream. And so when you talk about Hades, it's there. It's a myth because so many people have experienced it or been in contact with it or seen it happen, And so when you can pull your mind down and see that you live in this mythic dream reality, you can see that, you can see how people can understand that, okay, if I'm confronting death here, then when I'm confronting chaos, I can bring order. Like, it makes sense. When you're cleaning your room, there is a contribution coming from the human soul. It is the hero overcoming the dragon. It is true. And that does make sense. And that's quite a logical and interesting way to understand things. And it re-enchants you with the world in a large extent. And if you can get all of this stuff put together, if you can get this mundane myth connected with a big story, and many other people are connected with a big story as well, and you're all participating in a big story, maybe your life would be a lot more meaningful than it is now. And that's the way you could think about things like religions. Like, we suffer a lot now, despite the fact that we're very comfortable. But people back then had a lot more discomfort, but perhaps they suffered less because their meaning was in order. They had a myth to understand why they were suffering, and so their pain was duller. It had less power over them. But we've lost our gods, and so we have no spiritual power. We're a weak people. We're a stupid people. Or maybe you could even say an arrogant people. And so, yeah, most people are stuck in this. And the reason why I bring this up is because when you read through a lot of your dreams, you're somewhat accessing the right brain. Now, furthermore, you're accessing the right brain in such a way that it shows you it's like, despite the fact that you've gone and tyrannized your conscious experience with your left brain and created this disenchanted world of concepts and bullshit, like I am this, I am doing this, I am doing this. You've created this thing here, this left brain thing. Your right brain has been working away in the background. Like if you just got into politics and you said, fuck fiction, it's bullshit. Fuck Hollywood movies, I don't watch that. Fuck reading novels, it's all stupid. Like it's make believe. What value does it have? It goes and it ticks away there in the background. It keeps on going and it keeps producing films. And so you go and focus on politics and you get really into it, and it's this like nasty Twitter energy where it's just all like these stupid sentences and all this shit, and you're like getting really, really into it, and badly written articles coming out of the media. So that becomes your reality. It's very left-brained. And you have all these concepts and theories about what's going on. But then maybe if you like you got such a bad buzz off all this politics, you dropped out of it. You're like, all right, fuck this. Oh God, I haven't watched a movie in ages. And so you go back to watching films, and then you're there watching some film, and you start to see these patterns, these big diffusive patterns. And they're not specific like it is in the left brain stuff. It's not being like, oh, John McCain or Donald Trump or Leo Varadkar or whatever, or like Brexit and all this, like Brexit news, blah, 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 blah. It's not these little tiny things. It's like this big picture, it's this picture of like the archetypical Englishman at war with some like European bureaucrat, and in this dream there's a sort of meta story going on here, and you see that it's a much more of an emotional thing. Like perhaps you can add in, it's like perhaps the Englishman's pride, or the bureaucrat's like autism about how they want to like run the thing, and you see that it's almost like a force of different perspectives fighting against each other, and maybe you could even compassionately see both sides of what's going on, and it suddenly gives you this genius idea about a new approach. And then you go back to this left brain Twitter and you start writing in this shit on your Twitter, and it starts coming out, and people are like, whoa, this person sees things differently. Oh, that's a really hot take. That's a really original take. And this is the way you've got to understand what's happening with your dreams. You might tyrannize it, you might ignore it, you might oppress it, you might ignore and put it there, but it still keeps on churning this stuff out. And so when you do something like dream reading, you're essentially going into Hollywood. You're going in and you're saying, what movies have been playing? So you're there and you've got this little plan in your head, in your left brain, and you're trying to figure everything out with this, and you're like, oh, this is where I'm going, this is the plan, this is the steps. And then underneath it, related to it, you're getting the same plan, but in this colorful way, this mythic way. And the theory that Jung proposes is that if you go in and you collect a lot of these dreams and read through them, they give you a sort of alternate version of your life that's good for studying. It's like this. It will give you a different perspective that can be very useful, that will make you focus on different things, that will actually be pragmatic. Now, when I was doing this, as I said, it was in a rough spot in terms of work. I just dropped out of college. I was trying to get my straight and narrow in terms of art. Now, you may have saw my previous video where I was talking about my hero's journey with my artistic experience. This was like a part of it as well. And so I was really struggling to become great. And I had this left brain conception in my mind is that I want to be great like that person. That's what I want to be like, you know. That was my goal. And I had this momentum towards it. I had this hustle towards it. That's what I want to do. But a big learning experience for me was self-acceptance. I had to also make peace with the fact that, you can think of it this way. Imagine I was in a choir and there was a tenor, so that's a high voice, a male high voice. There was a tenor that was really talented and I was jealous of him. I wanted to be like him. But the choir master said, bro, you're a baritone, so you sing in the middle. And the baritone, you know, it can't reach all those high notes and all that. And so I keep on saying to myself, no, I want to be a tenor. I want to be cool like him. I want everybody to like him. And the orchestra dude is like, but I don't listen. No, I want this. I want this. I want this. This is what I want. And so I was pushing towards it. And then I started to hurt myself because I was needed to be like this. I needed this because I needed everybody else to see that I was so cool, especially myself. In order to feel good on myself, I had to escape who I was and become something else, this tenor, because I thought tenors are the only things that matter in the world. And so I had this need to escape myself. And what I needed to do to counteract, because that will is good, it was forcing me to improve, but it was misdirected in that it was damaging me. And what I needed to do is I needed to humble my ass and accept, okay, you are a baritone. And then within that context of accepting what you are, making sense, right? This is where I'm at, becoming the best version of that you could be. And that's what the choir master had to sit down with me at one point. At one point, I was too stubborn to listen to him, so he'd tell me this, and I'd just be like, "Fuck off." And then I got hurt, and then this broke me. The pain broke me, and I go to this orchestra dude, and I'm like, "Oh, I don't know what to do. I'm hurt now, and now I can't do anything." And he's like, "Look, you should have listened. Look, I'll tell you this: just stay within your range. Be the baritone. Be humble, and just be a really, really good one, and you will get very, very far. Trust me." You might not quite be the tenor, but you never know. You might be this new brilliant baritone. And then he'd be like, Frank Sinatra was a baritone. There's many, many brilliant baritones, you know. So don't get too caught up in it. And what was going on underneath that little story was this inability to accept myself versus this desire for idols. And you see this in many of these early dreams. I was dreaming of people like Wayne Rooney and Slash and Jim Morrison, all these cool people, these idols, and they sort of represent something I wish I was because I don't want to be myself. These better things than me, idols, heroes, you know. And then you see other characters like shy singers and a little implications, themes of me being full of shit and me having these problems to do with this, and it was I guess trying to point to this tension, this bad energy regarding this, and it required me to humble myself and take the virtue of humility. And I look through these dreams, going through this experience, and I see all of these themes were there. And perhaps if I had taken them serious, I could have averted my problem. Perhaps they helped me avert my problem. Like this is the other question to this: is how useful is this stuff? Like does it really help? Because I pulled all this stuff out, but I ran into problems anyway. Like I wasn't able to stop myself making those mistakes, and that could have been my fault for not taking them serious. So maybe you've got to take them serious in some sense. Like I'd read the dream and think it's cool, but would I act on it? But nonetheless, like looking back, there's most certainly something there. And so this is the implication of what you would be doing here in a most pragmatic sense. You'd be looking through all this stuff and seeing this sort of thematic Hollywood version of your life, and giving you commentary about pretty significant tensions in your life. And it might work as a thinking tool to help you make decisions, because many of like that period took a couple of years for me, and I made a lot of it was premised on bad first principles, bad emotional first principles, and thus bad decisions. And I wasn't going to get anywhere until I dealt with those. They were driving me to a hell, and I was pushing myself further and further. And then when I went down, I sorted those out. Things just became a lot easier, man. Like I remember when it came to making music, I started to bury into my mind that it was going to be a painful experience, because every time I tried to do it, I tried to reach beyond what I could do, and it would just like trigger up a pain or something like that. And that was me banging my head off the wall trying to go, and it made it a bad experience, and it didn't make it fun. And then I lost my enthusiasm, and then I was burning on like blunt hustle because I was still aiming for that goal. And at some point I had to slap myself and be like, relax, chill brother. Now that we have covered the why, we can talk about the how. Many people ask me, I don't have any dreams. How could I possibly remember my dreams? How could I write them down? How could I study them? I don't have any. So if you were interested in this, if you wanted to give it a whack, I do actually have an answer to the problem of I don't have any dreams. The second you wake up, pull out a journal or a laptop or your phone and say whatever, just brain dump, say whatever's on your mind. And I guarantee you in a month you will have dreams, and you will have plenty of them as well. Because once you start doing that, you become more aware of what happens in the morning. You're like, oh yeah, I do dream. But it has to be the second you wake up, like the moment you wake up. And that's which is the hard part, drilling yourself to get into that habit. But once it's there, it's like an huge torrent, and it's a waterfall. They just keep coming. They never stop coming. You will have too many. That will be your issue, because it takes a decent bit of thinking to try to figure out a dream. You have to really visualize it and imagine it. So you can just brain dump them and then throw them away and not think about them till later, and then you'll come back to them, and that's when the fun stuff happens, where you parse through them and be like, whoa, that's very, very, very interesting. So I'm going to get into my ones, and that's it. That's all you have to do. It's that simple. That's the how. Collect a lot of them and then go over them and look for themes like I'm talking about here. Find the myth that you were in. So as I've set the stage, let's take a look at one of the major first dreams that I have. Jung says that the first couple of dreams tend to be very, very poignant. Probably because you've never quite faced the unconscious before, so this is your first confrontation. So I was talking to you about my struggle with finding my character, my style, my voice and all this. And of course my first dream was this boyo. Let's see if you can get a good look at him there. Look at that buzz. Look at his mad eyes. Look how nuts he is. So let me read out what this says. Looking at me, he played. I was intimidated. He played a classical piece like a master. The floor was bright and it was daytime. He finished and then told me it was my turn. I walked around to the piano. I played the bottom keys and they sank. They sank through the piano into the ground. Now, before I explain the meaning of that dream and who that character was, there was other dreams, and some of these now are incredibly, incredibly important. Prophetic, you could say. For example, the theme that I saw at the beginning, when I looked back through these, I guess there was two themes, but one of the main ones was this constant vision of a certain archetype. So here it goes. One prominent dream, probably the first one that really stuck out in my mind, was I was at a festival. Now that was the other one. That's the second one, the festival theme. But I was at a festival and I was with a friend, and a friend had dreadlocks. He was like the cool friend, and we were all smoking DMT. And we smoked DMT together, or we were taking drugs together or something like that. We were hanging out and partying. And we sat down and we had a discussion, and we began to talk about the unconscious cities that people see while they're dreaming or on DMT. And then, of course, several other dreams were similar, presenting me this sort of figure, and it kept on showing up, this theme, this archetype, this symbol. I was in a fog with a woman, and the police came and arrested the women, and there was this vast swamp, and off in the distance were the glowing lights of some far-off city. And I got a jetpack and I flew over to the glowing lights, and I was with a crew now at this point, and there was 3 bulls guarding the gate to a city. And then I outsmarted the bulls and I got inside the gate, and there was a festival on. And as I walked through the festival, suddenly a figure like this ran up towards me and said, "Give me the keys." So I ran, and I ran underneath into the corridors below the city, the catacombs below the city, and I was running around in these endless circles and spirals until I finally came to a little toilet, like it was the end of it. And it was tiled red and white funnel, little final funnel. And I thought I had escaped him, and I turned around and his face was just like bang. Big flashing eyes like this, I remember. And there was many such cases of this. Many instances where I was seeing these sort of consistent repetition of this particular symbol, which made me wonder, well, what's going on here? What does this symbol mean? Another one, for example, was I was in a festival and there was a castle in the middle of it. So the theme sort of that was getting represented was the castle, the city, the kingdom, and the nation is a more abstract version of that. I only really saw it because your brain tries to make these things visualized. I only saw it as kingdom, castle, home, sometimes house. And I began to think, when I first saw this really, really quickly, I was like, well, what's going on here? What is this? And it kind of struck me really, really hard. What I was trying to do at that point was I was trying to fit into my society. I had left my home and I was trying to transform from, the country boy into adapting to this new city world I was in. I was trying to get into the kingdom. I was trying to use the keys to open up the doors to get into the kingdom. I was trying to find the keys to the kingdom. That's what I wanted. I wanted to get access to it. And I was struggling. It is hard. It's hard to find your place sometimes. It's, life's a bit of a hustle. The modern life doesn't hurt in the way it used to, but there's a dreariness to it that is existentially difficult. And if I was to say there was any theme that was superordinate, that was the big story that I was living in, this seemed to be it. And I never in a million years would have guessed that, because I had all these notions about what was going on and what I thought was important and all that. I was like, what I have to do, what does the will to power by Nietzsche mean? What does Jung mean in all this? What's the meaning of, the environmentalism or something like that? Whatever themes, whatever memes were common around me, or memes that were common in my academic talk, or just things that I was listening to on YouTube and all this. But it turns out when you go inside, it's not go inside, it's listen to what your mind allows to flow out. Something else, your dreaming mind. It shows you something that you would never really get to on your own. It's very, very interesting like that. It brought me to something that was poignant and true. And once I saw it, it blew my mind. I was like, of course. Like another theme I kept on seeing was having a squad, having a crew. And it's a very interesting thing that was always very hard for me. It was very hard for me to find a group of people dedicated towards a very specific goal, which is achieving something. Like specifically, like we're going to create something that will be successful. And that's a very difficult thing, but something in me knew that was the key to getting into the city. And there's so many myths that layer on top of this. This is what I'm going to talk about now for a bit. Like, think of the story of the young man. The young man is like, he lives within the kingdom that his father built, Mufasa, if you will. He is the young lion. It's the story of the lions. Mufasa builds the dominance hierarchy, the kingdom, the group, the society, the crew and all that. And then little Simba grows up. And then when Simba gets too big, Mufasa says, now this is a little bit different than the movie, but Mufasa says, and this is what happens in nature, what I'm saying, Mufasa says, get the fuck out. You're too big for your boots here. Go explore. So like prodigal son style. Or maybe Simba says, I want to leave or something like that. And so he fecks off into the chaos. And what Simba then has to do is that he has no access to females or food, or sort of, he needs a crew with him. And so he will go and he will either gang up with a load of younger lions. They'll form this like dangerous crew outside the dominance hierarchies. And what these pretty much are is like an alpha lion with a big harem of lionesses who do all the work, do all the hunting, and he just sits around being the genetic bull in the middle of it. So these boy lions, these Simba lions, will go wandering around trying to take him down, trying to find these other hierarchies and kill the king so that they can replace it in some sense. And this is a very ancient part of what it means to be a man. Like nowadays we run the risk of being entitled, thinking that we're allowed to just walk in and make demands and all that. But in some sense, like young men have to earn their place. Young men have to understand that they are coming in almost like the update for the kingdom. And being an outsider is, in some sense, an eternal position that the masculine, the young divine masculine spirit exists within. You are the hunter on the fringes, the dangerous new blood on the fringes. As Kronos was the old order for the Greeks, the god of time, who decided that he was afraid of losing his power, and so he got old and stale. And every time his wife would have a child, he would take the child and eat it instead of allowing it to progress. And this is the eternal challenge of youth, in that the old is crooked, stale, greedy, and it always wants to kill the youth. It is the boomer. It is taking all the youth and imposing massive amounts of student debt on them and destroying their housing markets and all this, and making things very difficult for them. And this has always happened. It's like a pattern built into the universe. The kingdom gets stale, and then you have the divine child, which it forms into the juicy boyo, which then has to go and launch itself onto this old hierarchy and defeat the king and update it. And this is what Jupiter did. This is what Zeus did to Kronos. Zeus was hidden by his mother, and instead Kronos was fed a stone. And this made Kronos all fucked up, and then Zeus came in and struck him, took him out, and then established the Olympian order. Established a new order. He updated the system, created a new ion, a new era, a new status quo, a new kingdom. And so this is where I was sitting. I was an outsider, and there's so much into this to bring it down to my personal life. I was a country boy coming up to the city. I wanted to fit into the city. I didn't quite, I wasn't quite integrated into the city and all this. The city was very, very big, and it was changing a lot. But then there's also that aspect of me wanting to develop a voice that fits into the culture. And I think the festival represents that a lot. The festival is like that bastion of culture. And so I'm trying to bring my voice and find a place within the culture. I had many dreams of me and my dad, for example, walking through festivals, trying to find a place for me to play. Those type of themes, So it was a big deal for me, was my identity. Now, what's interesting is there's even sides to this that, like, this archetype runs so deep for me because it just keeps on hitting on various different layers. So I'm going to riff on this a little bit more as well. For example, personally, never mind what it's like out there in the world which you're dealing with. Personally, you have a psychological kingdom, and that, I guess you could call that your left brain. That's the state, the state of things, the status quo, the way society runs. You have this setup, you have this plan in motion, and this would be built on a certain set of premises. I, for example, wanted to be a well-respected musician. I wanted to have a style that people respected and all that. So I had this ambition. And then this entire world order, this entire world view that I built up around me, this psychological reality I built up around me, was like the kingdom, was like my left brain, made up of these concepts which were pushing me towards this. So everything I did, I blocked out everything that was unnecessary towards this goal, and I focused entirely on achieving that goal. And I formed a sort of kingdom, a status quo, a state. And this created a momentum, and then, the day-to-day life of that little kingdom, like a little society where everyone's driving around in their cars, the day-to-day life of that little kingdom in my mind was like, how do I get closer to this goal? What do I do? And what's interesting about this is everything that was outside the kingdom, everything that was taking me away from my goal, I considered evil. So you have this kingdom, and then you have the walls, and then everything that's outside of it is like those evil young lions that are coming to fuck it up. And what's interesting about this is that if this kingdom, if this worldview, if this status quo that I build is wrong, which mine was, me fighting off the upcoming lions, the Zeus, the lion that wants to come in and kill off my bullshit and update the system, if my emotions fight that off and cause a great deal of problems. And so, for example, my issue was I wanted to be in the choir and I wanted to be the tenor, but truly I was supposed to accept that I was a baritone. I wanted to be something I wasn't. I wanted to be like all those heroes, but I should have accepted that I was a baritone, humbly chose amor fati and digested that this is what I was, and make the most out of that and understand that I could still get massive success. That's what I was supposed to do. But I was avoiding that because I wanted to force myself into this tenor thing, and I was incorrect. It was a delusion that I was forcing on myself. And the thing that would have helped me would have been stuff like paying attention to what I was emotionally reacting to. Like when someone would bring up music, I would get very, very emotional and envious of great musicians who are getting credit and all this, and ashamed of how shit I was. And when people would bring up stuff like career and job and hopes for the future, it would hurt emotionally. And it's very difficult for me to bring my mind back into that state because I don't feel that way anymore. Like I've just diffused this stuff, I've worked through it. But back then that was horrible to be in those situations with people where I was feeling how viscerally I was upset with my reality and how desperately I was trying to escape it. And so when someone would say, "Oh, that singer's nice," or when someone would say, "You've a nice, warm, deep voice," like if someone said that to me, I'd be like, "No, it's supposed to be high and falsetto and shrill." I had this momentum going. I had this inertia, this status quo, which was topped by my little chronos, which was my little goal and my little plan and my little daily routines that enforced it, and all these pillars of that were built up around me, these emotional rationalizations I built up around me, that protected me from admitting that I was trying to be something I wasn't. I had these set of biases, and if I look at it now and sort of model it, I guess, visually like this, you have your kingdom and you have these protection points, and the way you can understand what's in the unconscious, what you're hiding from, what's in your shadow, is look for the things that you emotionally react to. I can see it so clearly now. Like I'd look at where my envy was and what it was pointed towards. I'd look at where my shame was and what it was pointed towards. And I get this very clear vision of where my head was at, what was my status quo. And we can do this stuff all the time. The thing is, we just don't, because it takes effort. But you can take, like, this is a sort of abstract psychological reality that always works. You always have a sort of kingdom and status quo. And so if you want to like really do some work, you can sit down and you can say to yourself, what am I emotionally triggered by? And you definitely are triggered by something, and sit down and you feel that stuff out, and then you're like, wow, what type of picture is this painting? And then you can start asking stuff like, what is my goal, and what is this little worldview that I've built that's contributing towards this, and how dare say could those emotional triggers and the evil that is causing them, how could that possibly be Zeus, and how could I be Kronos? Instead of what you were usually thinking, which is, I am noble Zeus fighting against the demons from outside. Very interesting intellectual exercise, and that was something I needed to do. And then until I drove myself to rock bottom, and this is the warning with this stuff, like, it doesn't necessarily mean if you read your dreams you're going to figure this stuff out. And like I had all this, and I looked through it, and I could see all the patterns, but I didn't take action on them. So it didn't stop me from drilling to rock bottom. And that's when finally I started to accept this stuff. So that's something to think about as well. Is like, you're also very, very bad at changing. Like, perhaps you can use tools like this to nip stuff like this in the bud long before it manifests as in a dangerous way. But generally speaking, you're an ignorant little shit, and you do not want to listen to what is right. And it's interesting what the solution was for me. Like the whole idea of the dream I was living in. I was living in this dream, trying to fit into the kingdom, the way I saw, trying to fit into the festivities, the party, the culture. And the way I thought I'd do this is by crafting an identity of like a cool person with cool style and like cool, unique stuff, and bringing character and all this. And the vehicle that I thought I'd do that with would be my voice. And so I had attached a huge amount of emotion onto this. And this whole plan was essentially my comfort zone. And what was wrong was there was these gods, that were fueling it. The god of self-hate, of I'm not good enough. I don't accept myself. Like that, whatever God that is, you know, whatever superordinate principle it is, it's almost like I'm turning in the emotion into a God, whatever God that was, which is refusal to accept yourself, which is desire to be something else, desire to escape perhaps. Is it perhaps cowardice? I'm not sure. Versus the God that had to defeat that, you know, or maybe I had to take that God and like magic recast it into its virtue, its vice, turn it into its virtue. The virtue form of that would be something like amor fati. And until I did that properly, really on an emotional level, I was fucked. I was always going to drive towards the ground. I was going towards a crash. There was a virtue there that I needed to reclaim from the darkness, reclaim from the shadows, and it was driving me, and I could not escape it. As like, no matter where I went, no matter what I tried to do, I could not escape this because it was an emotional fire within me. So that was one God, and then from conquering that God also came a variety of other gods. For example, when I needed to be this thing and I was in a rush to be it, I had a lot of impatience, and for that reason I was sloppy, and for that reason I did not do things in an effective way, and so I often got injured, often made mistakes. I often got panicked when I was trying to sit down and take a long time to do something right instead of do something fast, and that led to low quality work, and as I said, plenty of sloppiness, plenty of mistakes. But after I went in and conquered this emotional God, if you will, and recast it as the virtue patience, everything got way better. This patient God has been a massive asset, a massive victory for me to have, and it's like it lives within me. It's like I've embodied the virtue or something like that. It's a difficult way to think about things, but it makes sense to me, you know. It's like the gods are sort of virtues that you connect with, and then and if you do it properly, if you really burn them into your soul, they guide you and they take you where you need to go. And it's all like a set of mindsets in some sense. And so yes, I have this badly made kingdom, badly made mindset, badly made status quo, and it relates to this idea. Not only it's very, very interesting to me. I love this shit. I imagine myself as like the lion outside the society, outside the kingdom, and inside this lion's head is this little kingdom that he's envisioning as the righteous kingdom, which is the way he wants the world to be. And the challenge for the lion is that he has this conception, this dream about the way the world should be. And what he's going to do, and this is why it's so risky, is he's going to attack Kronos' kingdom, Scar's kingdom. He's going to attack the established kingdom with his conception of the world. And if he's wrong, this kingdom will crush him, because this is way bigger than him. So he most certainly needs to be right. But if he is correct, if he has done true work and he's truly spiritually got his kingdom in order, he's got his mindset in order, and he's not coming from he's not possessed by demons, he's not possessed by resentment, he's not possessed by self-hate. He's doing it because he's actually conquered his inner spirit and got a clear vision of how the world should be, or how people should approach the world. And then he comes and he attacks this big kingdom. This big kingdom, usually because Kronos is corrupt and old and just a boomer, will crumble because it has no true power. It's a house of cards, you know. And so this lion out here has a very big responsibility. And you can think of characters like Socrates, like Jesus, like Solzhenitsyn, like George Orwell, like all the great artists, all the great moral characters. What they do is they formulate this vision of truth in their mind, the true kingdom, the kingdom of God, if you will, the kingdom of heaven, the way things should be. And then they launch it at the super kingdom, and some of them are lucky enough to live to see the results of their attempts, and they get to gain the kingdom and become kings, and others leave fantastic legacies like Jesus Christ, where they die but they don't compromise, and thus the kingdom in their mind that they passed on actually goes to take over the kingdom that kills them. And it's very, very profound. So I had this issue, and this problem with kingdoms getting stale is a big issue, and you can see it all early on in my dreams, and it was a big issue for me. My kingdom, I was stale, and I thought I was attacking the world with my bullshit kingdom, and it was just hurting me, and I needed to fix that. And I was not able to do that without one specific thing. And that was that. What is the thing that causes staleness? What is the greatest signal of staleness, especially in someone's character? It's lack of sense of humor. It's taking yourself too seriously. Now, if you look at the black soul here that came up in my very first dream, what does he look like? He looks like the Joker. He's wearing a purple blazer like the Joker, and he's not taking himself serious. Why so serious? He's the trickster. And this is very, very profound for me, because the most difficult way to break the kingdom is by fighting it. The most difficult way to change the king's mind is by shouting at him or telling him the truth. He doesn't want to hear the truth. If he wanted to hear the truth, he wouldn't have any problems. He'd ask for it. Tell me something that might offend me. That could be useful. But he doesn't want to hear that. He wants to tell me something that will keep me feeling good. That's what he wants to hear. And so the Joker, the jester, the court jester is the bastion of truth, because he can go in and he can say a joke. But the joke contains the truth. The joke makes the king see things from another perspective, because that's really what jokes are. They're reframes. And that's why you see this sort of death of comedy going on right now, where people go up and they say like some very, very tame, politically incorrect jokes, and people just go, people start losing their minds. And it's because we've become so stiff, so stale. And that's a sign that the kingdom is getting stale and stiff and too serious. And that means it's vulnerable. It's like a house of cards. It's like it's gone brittle. It's at risk of dying. It's at risk of crumbling if it's not careful. So Terence McKenna has this interesting phrase where he says the spirit of something like weed is this sort of feminine thing. The spirit of the mushroom is this sort of alien thing, when he's talking about taking drugs, and like the sort of attitude that things can have spirits. There could be collective spirits around things. Substances act as portals to spirits. He says the energy, the spirit of DMT and these elves that he described that lived within them was the spirit of the circus. And that's fascinating, because that's very close to the spirit of the trickster, isn't it? Loki was that god in Norse mythology that just always wanted to prank. And he was neither good nor evil, just quite a neutral force. And he wasn't in any way liked by the gods, but they didn't necessarily outright scorn him as like Satan or something like that. And so the bad figures have a place, they have a role. And this is absolutely true. Not only does the court jester in a sort of innocent way is able to slip under the radar of the king, the well-experienced person tends to stop taking themselves seriously, because life is an incredibly brutal and harsh place. And one of the key things you learn about life is that you do not matter at all, and no one gives a fuck about you, and no one's coming to save you. And nature, if she so willed it, she wouldn't even will it because she doesn't care enough about you, but you could get crushed tomorrow. You could get crushed so easily by a mistake, by a casual accident. You're redundant to the plan. That's fundamentally how it works. And everything in you wants to say that's not true. You want to say stuff to yourself like everything happens for a reason. Everything has a purpose. God has a plan for me. You want all that stuff to happen. And look, maybe it's there, but let's just look at the psychological possibility that you have to delude yourself to stop yourself facing the idea that like the world has no meaning and you're irrelevant in some sense. We avoid that at all costs. But when you, and so like sort of civilization, and especially, you know, like the mother energy treats you as like the special little boy, you matter, you have dignity, oh I love you, oh mother's love and all that. But then when you get thrown out into the big world, like, for example, a young man who would have to go and fight in a war. Like, I read many stories about World War I, and that's the thing that they speak, many of these soldiers. They write and they say, it was astounding to see how cold, callous, and indifferent, almost like a figure was looming over the trenches, a spirit of death that was blankly indifferent. That like almost hilariously didn't care, and would like allow you to die in this just almost absurd level of of pain, or just so humiliate you, blow you to pieces, like tear you apart in something so ridiculous as trying to gain like an inch of ground, or like, a whole host of a trench could run towards a gun through the inertia of command, not being able to figure out how to solve the problem of trench warfare. You could simply lose your life in that sense. You could just get charged into a gun as a test to try figure out, all right, how do we fix the gun and all that? And of course the command wouldn't figure it out. And it just all these very, very strange, indifferent, sad realities, these harsh, brutal realities that just totally take away your dignity and bring you down to earth in a dark way, and show you how human you are and how ugly you are, and maybe not ugly, but just how ugly life can be towards you, and how frail and fleshy you are, and how incompetent you are in the face of something like a fully loaded automatic weapon that's full of steel that can just chew you apart like it has teeth or something like that. And the seriousness we have in our heads is about, well, like, I matter, and there's this weird thing when you're a kid where you think, not only do I matter, but I'm like, everything's gonna work out. I am literally gonna be the king, and I am like vastly important. I really matter. Things are, no, that's what it is. I'm invincible. Nothing bad is gonna happen to me. And so when you put that to the test, your mind changes a lot. You get pegged down a lot. You get pulled back down to reality a lot. Behaviors like learning to fight do that. They humble you, Experiencing harsh realities humble you. And most certainly, since we live in this bubble of civilization, people are like neurotically suffering from lacking this in some sense. And so when you're the young man, like I was, naive, thinking I'm invincible, with all these notions in my head, this narcissistic idea of myself that was actually wounding me. Like people might think what I'm saying here is sort of like, oh no, you're trying to black pill people or make people bitter or pessimist and all this. But when I was thinking like this, I was a much more unhappy person. I was suffering more, and I struggled. I was not as successful. I struggled to be as effective and all that. And when I actually, saw this sort of ant-like, insect-like, irrelevant side of myself, the way I could be a worm, the worm within, when I saw how nature could stand on me and crush me like how I would stand on a snail and sort of be like, oh, fuck, I shouldn't have done that. But, oh, well, it's not a big deal. Once I started to see that, it grounded me. It gave me gravitas. And so in that first image where I go over to the piano with this figure, this trickster figure, this black soul figure, this Loki-like figure, this Joker figure, and I try to play piano like him, and it sinks down into the ground. It sinks down because it was calling me to gravitas, I feel, and it's something I very much lacked. And then you'll notice that when you have that bubble, the figures that are most profound to you, most mysterious to you, are those people who have that gravitas, or those people who are in touch with that gravitas. And of course, like the jester, they stand outside your kingdom and they tend to make fun of your kingdom, your little reality, your little world, your little palace of concepts and truths that you're standing on top of, being like, this is how reality works. This is how I've it all figured out. This is exactly how everything goes down here. And then he comes in and he just pulls one stone out from the bottom and it all falls down. And then you're suddenly naked. But you say, no, my palace is still here. It's a palace made of clouds, but a castle in the sky. But still I will avoid admitting that everything has fallen apart around me. I just want to maintain that entitlement and whatnot. And so the dark figure, the awakening figure, the thing you need to do, the shadow for me, was this Joker who had gravitas, who had faced the seriousness of life. And that's something I really, really needed to do. And it's like, it's so difficult to describe because this is just a potent archetype. There's so many angles to this. Like, I see so many characters in this. I see the energy of, like, I made a song out of it called Black Soul, but that's only one very kind of very, very religious energy. I was almost like I was trying to voice nihilism in that one. But there's also a very, very humorous energy. The ability to look at the world as it is and joke the way the Joker does. Why are you so serious? Why are you taking things so serious? And then the one thing I was looking for was a personal style. I wanted to have character. I wanted people to respect me for my character, and I wanted to be cool and all that. I wanted to fit in, but I wanted to fit in and stand out, being an individual at the same time. And so this character, this like Joker, like black soul character, is interesting as well, because that gravitas is tied to that idea of amor fati. You cannot accept your fate when you are deluded, when you're ignoring it. I accept my fate. It's like you're not even opening your fucking eyes, man. You must look where you are, look around you, look at your reality, look at what's happening to you, look at what actually, observe, don't judge, just observe the world and be like, oh fuck. The insects get crushed and I'm just a glorified insect. Like this, you just look and see what it is and then accept that. And that's fundamentally what I need to do. The first fucking dream. That's what I needed to do. I needed to look around and I needed to realize, oh, you've got this narcissistic, entitled image of how you want success to work. It's like, oh, it has to go down this logical path that I've already pre-planned out. And instead of me... And then so I went on it. I hustled. I was like, oh, I'll overcome my delusions by working hard. It's like, oh yeah, that's going to work, bro. Yeah, good luck to you. And what I was doing was I was running away from myself. I was running away from accepting myself. And what I was trying to get was the things I saw in my heroes. My heroes had style, uniqueness, gravitas, character. And the way they got that is that at some point they just said, I am what I am, and I will develop my own style, my own voice, and I will play to my strengths. You know, Slash didn't go up there and try to be a violinist. He didn't go up there and try to be a singer. He went and he fucking learned guitar, and he played guitar fantastically, and he did pretty well off it. It's the same with any singer, like Jeff Buckley, one I really admired. He would have been a very, very bad baritone jazz singer, but he was a fantastic high falsetto voice. Frank Sinatra would be the opposite. He would have got nowhere if he tried to sing, you know, R&B, but he did fantastic singing smooth, chilled out jazz that was really, really low registers. And so these are things that were vitally important for me to understand conceptually, mentally, but vitally difficult for me to confront because they hurt, because they were outside the kingdom. And my little kingdom was precious to me. Oh, I know how it works. I had this left brain thing, and I needed to dissolve it into the right brain thinking, the dream thinking, and allow it to update. So I needed this little lion outside me to kill it. But of course, I don't want to face the lion, so it morphs. I don't want to face the update, so it morphs into a dark shadow that possesses everything I lack, such as gravitas, evil, power, humor. And then it floats on the outside. And when I could accept that into myself, when I could stop taking myself so serious, I found a bit of freedom. So in regards to the circus, which was a very, very prominent theme, specifically the festival, the culture, the way people gather together and do stuff, that is, in many senses, the sort of the Joker abstracted, the trickster abstracted, the forefront of the world is often that place that you don't take things too serious, the entertainment space, you know, where the party is going on. And if you think about the typical experience of feeling like an outsider, you see everybody in the party having a good time, and you're like, oh, I want to be part of that. I want to live that life where I'm carefree and I'm enjoying my life, and I'm like participating, and nothing seems to matter, and there's no pain. Everybody's just laughing and having fun and bouncing around and all that. And you see that all around you, and it's reinforced through entertainment, and like just, you know, everybody's got a party going on. There's a festival going on somewhere else, and you're not part of it. And so then your life, you know, lonely in your isolation, your tragic life, you're sitting down there and you've all these problems, you've all these worries, whereas you look at all these people who are carefree, but you have all these worries, and so you're sitting there isolated and separate and away from that kingdom. away from that heaven that you want to transform into. And this is what was going on deep in my mind. I was like, how do I get out of here, out of this tragedy into this comedy? How do I get out of this difficult place and into there? And I would be like, well, I want to go in and get accepted. I want to be cool. I want to walk in and, incubate this perfect character like Gollum, my precious, and then I can throw myself into the festival and people be like, wow, an actual real god. Bow, yes, you are king, you are king, you are king. And so there's this big prominent desire to enter into the festival, the party within the kingdom and whatnot. And as I said, there's so many dynamics to this. One of them was not taking myself serious, so I could actually be myself, and then in something that's like a spiritual level in its conception, or its resonance, or its consequences, is that if you accept yourself and make the most of your niche, you will fit in somewhere. The rule of nature. And so this was a big deal for me. Now there was another side of this as well, is that the outsider represents something that I saw very, very well represented by the modern Joker phenomenon, the modern film. All these dreams are long before this modern film came out, but all of these themes have just grown culturally. So in some sense, my little personal dreams and my little tragedy do have some type of connection to the bigger meta memes that are going on, because my little struggle as this lonely lion outside Cronus's festival party where he's eating the future in some sense, that is not unique to me. Everybody's going through the same. The more personal, the more universal, as they say, the more specific to my reality it was, the more it's shared with others in some sense. My little lonely struggle was not the only one that was happening. The reason why it's so hard to resonate is because, in some sense, the way to overcome that loneliness is to you have to fight these demons within, and no one can help you with that per se. Like, that's something you have to, on some level, do yourself. And so when I see this whole modern Joker film, and it's become like the highest selling comic book film of all time or something like that, you're looking into it and you're seeing a kind of global dream, a collective dream that's popped. It's hit on the energy correctly. And it is that thing where you've got this party going on and you have a load of people who are outside of it. Now there's something weird about the party, because the party is sort of fake. It's the circus. It's the entertainment that's made up by Hollywood. It's the dream, it's an imaginary place. It's Neverland. It's the utopia, the world where no one has any problems. But the vast majority of people have these personal tragedies, and we don't have anything deeper to contextualize a big story to make us understand what our tragedy, what our suffering means. And so we keep spiraling downwards into the pain of this, and we keep looking at this party and feeling like we are missing out, but at the same time there's this weird shallowness to it. And then on top of that shallowness, the party is protected by this really rigid, brittle and strict, serious set of rules that if you're in any way outside of this, you'll get cancelled. And there's this it's almost like the Catholic Church, or whatever they tell us the Catholic Church was. It's that, rigid and authoritarian and tyrannical in that sense. And so you, as this outsider, start to realize that you're not the hero inside the kingdom. And you're this outsider, and everybody in the kingdom sort of scorns you a bit. Like, that's what the Joker went through in the film, and that's what life is like for a young man. As I said, if you have your own conception of the truth, if you have the update and you've done the work to make sure that your soul is pure, so your update is correct, your update's going to be different than Kronos. And so everybody who's part of Kronos is going to be like, they're going to slight you, they're going to hate you. You're going to be hated. As Gandhi said, first they laugh at you, then they call you a boyo, and then you win. First they lash you, then they hate you, then you win. Something like that. But you as that outsider, so you see this, you see you're getting scorned, And your whole life you wanted to fit in. You did, you shut the fuck up and you threw away your truth. You threw away your update because you wanted to fit in. You tried your best to be something you weren't. You went against your amor fati because you wanted to fit in. That's what I did. I wanted to be like something that I thought people would like. And so you're going around and you're sort of, you're going to people. It's like, oh, look, I'm being the way that you want me to be. I'm smiling. I'm not being mean. Oh, I'm laughing at your jokes. I'm being the way you want me to be. I'm dressing the way you all want me to be. And still they hate you. And then at some point you just snap. You're like, I can't take it anymore. I can't take it anymore. Like me hitting rock bottom. You just snap. It hurts so bad that something in you just says, wake the fuck up. And then suddenly you quit with your delusions. You quit trying to do things for other people. You go sort of selfish. You go sort of Loki-like. Everybody tells you to be, being selfish is wrong. For the first time in your life, you say, I don't give a fuck what is wrong. I'm in this for me right now. And you say, okay, I don't care anymore. And you look around and suddenly Kronos, you see, holy shit, he's eating his babies. And all the babies are dancing within his little playpen that he set up for them while he prepares them to eat them. And you're like, that's hilarious. Because you're supposed to say, oh, that's evil. And get all serious and tack it. But at this point, these people have broken your soul. And so you just laugh. You see it as a comedy. And then you realize that they're going to start calling you mad, but madness has the taste of freedom. And perhaps that's what it means to be free. It means to break away and be separate. And so this joker, this fool, this trickster, for the first time in his life gets to decide who he is. Now, the resentment, the hate inside the young man who will go through this experience, if he does not master it, as I said, if he does not go into his soul and conquer it, he runs the risk of turning back on Kronos and saying, hey, do you know what would be really funny if I crossed the final taboo? But if you can master that energy, that resentment, and change it and form the update properly, you can spin the Joker archetype to its next step, which is the savior. The fool precedes the savior. The jester proceeds the savior. Once you develop your gravitas, you can return, and then you will have true power, and then you'll be that lion coming in, updating. And so the Joker sort of maps the step before that, the feeling before that. And I see it resonating with people, and I think that's because the big story we're in could be that. Are we coming towards the end of one of Kronos's ions? You see people talking about it a lot. I don't know. Like, if this dream stuff is to be real, should we be looking at this stuff and asking it hard questions? Is it useful for predictive accuracy? Am I making this shit too profound? Maybe I'm taking it too serious. Who knows? But there's something you can think about. Maybe you'll come back to this in 10 years and be like, whoa, well, they got a few things right. But is this signal of like the Joker move me an indication that things are getting crazy out there? Who knows? Nonetheless, a prominent theme was the kingdom, and you can see why this profound archetype came to me in my dreams, because I am the special one. I am the prophet. But there was also the theme of the festival, which is this party as I've described. Now, another aspect of this was a big deal for me, was the idea of European culture. As we have this weird thing now where I was talking to my granny there recently, and she was telling me that her town is changed a lot. When she used to get up, she used to walk down the town, she'd talk to everybody. How was it getting on there today? But it's changed a lot in the last 20 years. And so now she walks down the town and no one talks to her. She's sort of like, oh, what's going on here? And she's noticing how the accents are fading. There's no strong accents anymore. Even my accent's changed a lot. The other one is Dad was saying when he's in the car, usually, I remember this when I was younger, I'd be in the car with him, and another car would come by and he'd just be like, da-da, da-da. I'd be like, why is your finger up? It's like, oh. So that was a little hello thing that they used to always do to each other. And he said that stopped happening now. And it's almost like you can see just these little things are signals towards something ending. Do we know what it is? I don't know. As we get absorbed into this giant city world, because this is sort of what's happening. We're getting absorbed to this giant mindset of the city mindset. Like that finger thing where people who are driving used to flash the finger at each other. That was very common among the country folk in Ireland. But the second you got into the city, it stopped. And so that was always the old joke. It's like, oh, dubs would be all like, oh, here what you doing there now? Yeah, what you sticking your finger up at me, man? That's the only sticking finger I stick up. Whereas the country folk would be like, how are you? On your tractor or something like that. And so that stuff, you can see that the city sort of erodes that. It makes it too difficult to form funny little quirks like that. And European culture as a whole, from being industrialized so long, we're sort of reaching, the Chronos order. We're coming to we're very stretched right now. And a lot of those old cultural phenomenons have essentially crumbled away at this point. Like what it means to be European is a massive question. What it means to be Irish is a very difficult and complex question. And Christianity is on its legs are wobbling, but that was the crux of our identity. We're all afraid of being racist now, but our races were the crux of our identity. And so what does it mean to be us going forward? How does our music, how does all of our stories work if some of the first principles that held them up or were embedded in them we now think are evil? Like what happens there? That's a very, very difficult issue. And so you see what's going on with our culture is all of those old institutions fell apart. The church, perhaps some of the old festivals that we did based around those, the old celebrations we did around those, the way that we'd hold the culture together. Things like Irish music, for example. A very prominent thing I always talk about Irish music is that in an attempt to preserve it, they made it very conservative. You weren't generally, it was a little bit frowned upon if you tried to innovate by, creating a radical new song or bringing in new instruments. Like purists would often scorn at acoustic guitars. They're like, I don't like that stuff. Get that stuff away. In the folk movement, when Bob Dylan started playing an electric guitar, they were all like, "Feck off with this shite." So that was a big deal, but it stopped it from updating. It held it back. It froze it in some sense. And so, what are we supposed to do? How am I, as a young millennial, supposed to absorb all this amazing, crazy new stuff that's coming around? The opportunity to see all of the world's culture. How am I supposed to absorb that all in while also absorbing my culture, which has all these crazy problems, and morph it into something like a unique character, unique voice? Like, that's such a massive collage for me to take in. Rap music, jazz music, rock music, trad music. And that's just music, never mind everything else. Like, what does it mean? It's almost like a information overload situation. But we see things starting to form naturally, like the unconscious is doing its work. You see people gathering under a sacred diet and something like veganism or the carnivore thing. These things are coagulating. We're working our way through it. It's slow, it's confusing, but these things are happening. We're reconceptualizing a sort of set of myths for ourselves. And we have new institutions. You want to get that new idea, that new identity. What happens is you grow up, you have that sort of what's left over from that past is still preserved sort of in our parents, but now kids are getting presented the festival life where they go and they take drugs, which are just like almost accepted at this point. And then they have this portal where they go through their festival years, their party years, where they go crazy for a while. And during that time, they crystallize their identity, their set of values. There's this whole world. You go to the festivals, and it's this whole world that is so much different than the way you grew up, and things are so accepted and so free and all that. And that seems to be a very prominent crux of culture for the European people, I've noticed. It's a really, really big deal. I don't know what to make of that, though. I don't know, let's not judge this stuff, but this was a big thing for me. I remember when I was growing up, when I found festival culture and all that, I really found something in it, and I attached to it, and I was like, wow, this is really, really cool. What more can I find here? There's so much color. It was like the circus had come back, That was a big part of it. And so one specific dream that I had was I was standing in my home house and it was getting invaded by city folk. And myself and Dad were standing across this doorway. And we both had shotguns. And we were both protecting ourselves from this city guy that had a chainsaw trying to cut in through the door. Now, I had the special ability in this dream where I could become any character I wanted to be. So what I did is I became the Edge for stealth. Now, that's fascinating because I wanted to hide at home. I remember... And me and some of these friends I knew up in the city, we would always I used to like U2, and we'd always make fun of the Edge from U2. And part of me felt bad because the Edge was like the loser, and I liked U2, and it was this. I could see this connection between not being good enough and being like the Edge, and holding back on who you are, like not having any anima, not having any raw, intense emotional experience that you'd see in more people with more swagger, people with more of that like black soul swagger, like Jimmy Page, for example, or Led Zeppelin, the way they'd roar. It was very primal, almost soulful in some sense. And then you'd see the Edge, which is this like personification of the modern. The Edge is the guitarist for U2, the personification of the modern stale sort of like beta, and he was Irish as well. So it was all this stuff was layering together, and I felt that like we all have that feeling that we have this roaring inner world, and we have these roaring inner feelings about the freedom that we could have if we could just be who we are, but we hold it, we hold back so much because we're afraid of getting judged or being weird or embarrassing ourselves. And then we see these people who express freely and we're like, oh, I wish I could be like that. So the Edge was sort of this character I'd associate with like hiding, stealth, exactly. And I used to have this little cap, and even though I wanted to transform into something else, it's interesting that at home I was this person, I was scared of being myself around even my family. And so the idea of me transforming was my attempt to escape all that as well. And that was a big thing for me, I remember. Like, I'm trying to set up this dichotomy where I had this, this goal, this kingdom where I was trying to reach out from it. And it required me to amor fati if I wanted to make any progress. And Jung has this very, very interesting phrase where he says, you could travel the world if you want, but you will only find yourself when you come home and look in the mantelpiece. And that's sort of what was happening with me. Like, my issue was an acceptance thing, and that involved me accepting who I was, where I'm from, what my reality is. And I was trying excessively to escape that because I didn't believe in it. I didn't think it was good enough. I thought it was a boring story. And it's this theme I brought up at the start, that we don't see God because we don't look low enough. Like Joyce is like, the mundane has magic in it that is eternal. And that's such a huge struggle, is that your boring everyday life, you develop this hate for it. And then you want to find something exotic, and you want to change, you want to transform into that thing, and that's like a crucial sin on who you are. And only when you turn around and look at what you saw as routine, day-to-day boring, and learn how to redeem it from that mundaneness, from that boringness, to see what's magical in it, see what's eternal in it, only then can you truly own yourself in some sense. You have to take possession of who you are, and you will never escape that. And that was such a massive mistake for me. I was constantly trying to escape that. So there was that thing of getting invaded by the city culture, and me trying to be more like the city people, as opposed to being like, it's okay to be from the earth, to be salt of the earth. And then there was another one similar that's quite interesting as well. My sister was stolen by a cannibal, and what he did is he took her to his apartment in the city, only the apartment was modelled exactly like my home house. And instead of eating her or anything crazy like that, what he'd do is he'd get her to play piano, because he was lonely and he just wanted someone around to play something nice. He wanted that, anima, feminine grace. So you can see these themes coming up consistently: home versus city home, fake home, strangeness, all this type of stuff. Now, regarding to the voice, there were some specific early dreams that were prodding on my lack of coming to terms with the fact that I had my voice. A metaphor that I may have brought up already, but I'll bring it up again, is the idea of not only do we have Mufasa and the kingdom and all that stuff, but you also have the ancient myth related to Lucifer, and Tolkien uses this in Lord of the Rings, where you have the kingdom, which is almost like an orchestra in harmony, led by God, and then you have Lucifer, which is the arrogant angel that is the best soloist, the best singer, if you will, inside the context of the choir. And God is there telling him, all right, you're a baritone, a brilliant baritone, the best singer we have, but you're a baritone. And Lucifer's like, no, I want to be a tenor. I want to do all the ranges. Or even worse, God says, play a solo there, and Lucifer goes diddly 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 I, and so he sings like, and he goes diddly 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 I, and then off. What happens is God says, okay, cool, enough. It's not about you, it's about the greater song. So you have like 8 bars, and then that's it. So make the most of those 8 bars. And Lucifer's like, fuck you. I wanna do 300 bars. I wanna do all the bars because I'm the best here. Why do we listen to anyone else? So he starts getting a bit arrogant. So him and God argue, and then Lucifer turns around and says to some of the angels, guys, if we fucked off away from this fool, God, like, we can make our own orchestra, and it'd be class, like, fucking the best, like. And so he takes some of the angels and they dive down, they go off and they make their own world. It's the same as Mufasa and the little lion. The lion says, let's get the fuck out of here and go establish our own kingdom. And so the breakaway is in some sense negative. It's that breakaway into the fallen world. Lucifer falls. Lucifer goes down and creates pandemonium, creates his unique own kingdom. And so, like, all of this stuff fits. Like, is as negative as this story is framed, it's a necessary step for the son to break away from the father, for you to break away from the order, and then you fall down into pandemonium. And then if you can redeem your soul and stop the kingdom you create, pandemonium, that's the name of Lucifer's kingdom in Paradise Lost, if you can stop that from being evil, from being a manifestation of your own hate and resentment towards the Lord, and you can find the eternal principles and create the truth, then you could perhaps go back to the orchestra, the kingdom. Perhaps if it is ruled by a tyrant since you've left, this is what happens to Horus and Simba, and then you can be the updater, the savior. And these myths are so huge, but they're so true, you know? Yeah, and like, it was in my life. That was my attempt to break away from home and then go to the city, pandemonium, and then carve my own voice. And then the big journey, the big realization, the big dream, the big myth I had to do was sort of conquer my own soul by accepting that, okay, no, it's actually worthwhile fitting in with the plan that God had laid out for me. So maybe he does have a plan, who knows? Fitting back into the orchestra, and then I could return and then contribute something that harmonized with everything. It sounded fucking good. It wasn't just this narcissistic attempt to destroy it all. And so the voice was a big deal. The voice was a very important way for me to experience this. I had a particular dream where I was trying to get a black woman to sing. So my anima, as I said, European culture has this staleness and I you know, the shame associated with what's local, what's normal, what's mundane, what's boring. And so I was always looking outwards. I was like, oh wow, black music, that's awesome. That soul music, that has soul. I wish I had something like that was exotic and cool and different. And that pulled me away from the magic of what is my people, you know? And that was something it took me a while to learn. It's like, wow, the European culture is fantastic. Like, there's so much soul in it. It's just that we've lost touch with that, and we need to redeem that, you know, and evolve it. There's the issue, obviously, with trying to conserve it too tightly and choking it in its cradle. And so then I met a mate in this dream, and this is my bro, and he was really relaxed, and he was playing jazz music. And then I tried to play saxophone. And then I had another mate who I didn't really like, and he turns around and he says I was too stoned to play jazz. And then that kind of pissed me off, so I walked out, and as I was going down the stairs, there's this frog going up the stairs, but he was stuck in a loop. So every leap he'd have, he just get stuck forever. And there's a few very, very interesting things here, because obviously, like the soul, me trying to, the anima, the soul, what my voice is and all this, me trying to figure that out, and too shy to sing, so I was afraid. I was like, it's not good enough. But then I have my mate who's relaxed, and jazz is almost like that idea of being yourself. Like this black soul character I associated with jazz because he was, the individual, the one with character. And jazz had that myth inside of it. It's individualist. It's almost like jazz is a Lucifer in some sense. So it can be too crazy. The solos can be too nonsense like, and then they go kind of shit, and they pull everything apart and they don't make sense. But then there is also this energy in it where it's like, express yourself, that type of thing. It's that sort of postmodern idea. And I had like this particular friend who was in the stream. I've always associated with him being chilled out and cool and relaxed. He doesn't take anything too serious. And then this other mate was always like snide, and he would stab at your soul and get to the point and that type of thing. And he was calling me too stoned, and he said I had brown eyes, and I associated that with being full of shit. And this is all these things that kind of clicked back then when I read through them. And I, of course, didn't face them properly till I smashed on the ground, but I was full of shit. I was ignoring myself, it was all there. And then the Sisyphean frog, the frog is stuck in the loop. That's exactly what I was, trying to get to the next level, trying to leap to the next level instead of, sorting out this level and then setting the foundation so that I could slowly channel up like a rocket taking off. Another very, very interesting one. This is where dreams can be so profound. I was walking through a school, and I met a handsome guy, a famous guy from school who was very handsome, and I walked into a hallway, and then there was 2 secret questions. And yes, I met one of my old friends, and I said, do you know the 2 secret questions? He was like, what? So I saw this beautiful girl, and I said the 2 secret questions to her, and she came over, and we got romantic. And then suddenly there was this huge flood, this huge crowd of people came in. They pushed us into a locker room. And inside the locker room, there's this like magic animal that was silver black, almost like this, weasel dog that was bouncing all around the room. And a security guard came in chasing after it. And everybody was pointing at it going, the plight, the plight, the plight. And then it leaped off the wall and went around my neck and span around it. And then I woke up. Now, I had no idea what the plight was. So I looked it up. I said, what the fuck is the plight? What's going on with the plight? So I looked it up, and it kind of shook me a bit. It said, a very bad or unfortunate situation. The potato famine, for example, was known as the blight, the potato blight. It's a related word. Plight is that negative thing. And then later I'd get that injury with my voice. That same thing. And these all dreams were all packed in a simple period. And I don't know, how did that plight get attached around here? Because that was such an emotional issue for me. Oh, my voice is damaged. That was the whole crushing of my identity. Did the dream call it? If I had been able to pay attention to this properly, would I have been able to prevent it somehow? Something kind of has always got my noggin jogging a bit. What does that mean? And that was one of those things where I didn't know what the word the plight meant. I don't ever remember hearing that word before. Yet, when I looked it up, it had a meaning. And honestly, I don't remember learning that word. It wasn't a word that was part of my vocabulary, but it was after that. Where the fuck did I pick that up from? So stuff like that kind of sets you off a bit. You're like, well, that is weird. That is weird. So to breeze through a couple of random dreams that I just find fun. We were all in a large hallway where the leader was directing us for some form of writing seminar. We were all sitting on the floor, and the director, who was a strong female, began to eliminate us by a process of elimination. She asked a question to a group of foreigners, but they could not answer. I was laying beside a girl, and we were flirting and touching each other. The process involved trials such as washing out our hairstyles in order to neutralize our personalities. I discussed with the director, when asked, how everything is actually dead, and the only thing that makes a cell different from a stone is a strange animating principle. We were eventually culled to 4 people, and I stood up to go to the bathroom. When I exited, I left into a hallway and saw a door with a famous writer who was having a movie produced, and it said, Wildflowers, Orchid. Down the hall I saw 2 eerie, grudge-like dolls staring at me. And then I woke up. What it means. Now this is an interesting one, because this when I had this dream, I was like, all right, this stuff has to be symbolic. Nothing this crazy could happen. My grandmother passed away. This woman was Gorta. She also seemed like she was unpersonal or an archetype. She was laying in a glass box which I was using as a bed. I became anxious that I'd catch the virus of her. I awoke to my family's Sunday roast from this bed. And it turned out that I got out of bed, walked downstairs, sat down at the table, and my dead granny was being served as the main course. I was sort of disgusted at the idea of the meal. My plate was empty, but my other granny filled it upon my plate was empty, but my other granny filled it upon arrival. I wanted a large, clean piece of meat, but instead I got a patchy bit, imperfect. I sat down to the meal to begin eating, and I had a horrific and eerie feeling throughout it. Now, what's really weird about that is, like, okay, there's 2 things. First of all, this is another instance where I didn't know what the word meant. Gorta. What does Gorta mean? Never heard that word before. I was like, that's a weird name. Didn't even sound like a name. So I looked up what Gorta meant. Gorta is the Irish word for famine. I didn't know that. It's the Gaelic word for famine. This woman's name was Gorta. That just shook me. I was like, whoa, that is weird, man. And I've always thought that the problem with the Irish, and the problem with me, what I inherited off the Irish, and it's my responsibility to deal with, it's not like the Irish's fault, is that scarcity. Like, that was such a big issue for me. The sort of, we're not like, we don't think in terms of abundant scale. We don't think big, because, we were the people who got starved. We're the little people in some sense. And then, to top on top of that, like, this is a very interesting dream. I was like, all right, eating my grandma, that's just too insane. This has to be symbolic. But then, recently I saw some Swedish doctor suggest that in order to fight climate change, we've got to start considering moving past the taboo of cannibalism and start to eat our dead relatives. We have to get used to that idea. That's the way we're going to have to move forward. And I was fucking floored. I was like, that came true. That was the one dream I was like, that will never happen. And it happened. I couldn't believe it. Now, maybe no one actually ate them, but it was more the fact that became sort of normative. That just blew my mind. Because I thought, if I ever told someone about this, I wouldn't be able to present it as like, a serious scene from a movie. People would be like, that's too weird. I'd have to make it like a symbol or something. But it became a legitimate fronted idea by someone. And the reason why they were suggesting such a thing is scarcity. There's not enough resources. There's not enough. The earth's going to die, so we must eat the grandmothers. I'll let you figure that one out. Now, this is a very, very cool one, because this is almost like the perfect archetype dream. I dreamt I was living a recurring dream, a dream where I was being chased by an invincible demon, a sort of cat-like monster which always outran me. Instead of allowing it to beat me, frighten me and wake me up, I had it bite me. I let it bite me. It hooked me with a tooth deep in my ear and I woke up, but I held on to it and I pulled it out of the dream to face the pain. It felt like the pain was going to overwhelm me, but I resisted. I felt like its mouth was going to eat me, but I remained strong. Then I defeated it. I beat it and I realized that it was a fear demon, one of Hades. Its message seemed to be stretched into two paths, both leading to the mouth of unavoidable despater. I could live a life afraid of pain and never truly live, or I could face life's challenge and take the pain for what it is, a dream monster. And then I really woke up. Now that, I think that's bad. Like, that's fucking right, you know? I listened to that and I'm like, yo, Dreams got that one nailed, man. And this final one, and there's many more, but I'm keeping it brief, you know? This final one was very interesting because I was so apolitical. I didn't give a fuck about politics. I didn't even know who Donald Trump was. The only time I saw Donald Trump before this, I had someone showed me a minute clip on YouTube, a Mexican friend, and they were like, oh, look how much of an idiot this guy is. And it's like, you know, it was the beginning of the, oh, look at Blumph thing. But I didn't know who it was. I just saw some blonde guy, looked like Boris Johnson. That's what I thought. Talking. I was like, all right. Really didn't seem like much. And then around about 2016, I had this dream. I was in a hallway at some sort of presidential rally. I was in the crowd watching two candidates signal to the crowd. They were trying so hard to outdo each other that one of them began sticking their fingers up at the crowd. Things became chaotic. And I remember my mate appearing on the podium briefly. The president, flipping the bird, was on the left. So that would have been on the right-hand side, but it was on the left in my perspective. Suddenly, as the chaos arose, a series of figures who seemed like some sort of law enforcement appeared. I was with two friends, and someone from our crew insulted or challenged them, so they came down and hurt him to make an example of him. Then they looked at the rest of us and said, time to get your friends. And they came after us. We tried to escape the building as the crowd stalled and became congested, but we got out nonetheless. On the street, I was divided from my two mates because there was something following us called the liable truth. And it was trying to get us. Now, this is another instance. I had no idea what the liable truth meant. They took a side path as I went running up the hill, and my mate shouted to me not to run but to shimmy side by side, because this liable truth was like this. It was the same thing as that the way the piano keys in the Black Soul Dream sank into the ground. This liable truth was like this sinkhole that was moving across the ground that was coming to get me. I spent the next while dodging side by side to try to put myself out of alignment with this liable truth, which was stalking me. I ended up on a country road and was using a trolley to streamline my way, but the truth was honing in on me and well able to keep in alignment. There were cars coming the other direction, and I was trying to use them to shake it off, but to no avail. I broke, and I wished I knew the way to escape this follower. Suddenly I found myself in some form of Buddhist confessional box, and it seemed like I was appealing to the figure there for advice, the bhikkhu, who said calmly that all that is needed to escape it is presence. And then I awoke. Yeah, no, that was obviously an allusion to pretty much what would happen the election, and the election kicked off almost immediately after this. And suddenly everybody, like my friends, would start to bring up, what you think of Donald Trump and all this? And I was like, who the fuck is that? And then I began to slowly learn that it was probably going to be one of the biggest cultural phenomenons of my generation. And yeah, it was very, very strange. You know, that just have these things imprinted. So when I started to hear about this stuff, I'd always think, that sort of reminds me of my dream. What means? And then the liable truth, like there's three things that popped into my mind. I didn't know what I didn't know what a libel was. And then I look it up after I wake up and I'm like, whoa, it's slander. A libel is when you accuse someone essentially of blackening your name with a lie, I think. That type of thing. So liable, I have this idea of liable, that word, and that means responsible. I had thought of the idea of liberal. And you know how they work nowadays, the modern, I guess you could say the modern woke culture, how they're so quick to slander, so quick to blacken your name by like making up lies about you. This is why most people don't trust them anymore. And then of course there's the libel idea, which is a legal term. And it's like you're running away from that. It's like you're running away from the lies. You're afraid of the lies. I don't really know what this meant, but obviously that became a huge theme. Like, I had no idea any of this stuff was a big deal at all. I didn't know there was a culture war or anything like that. I didn't know what was going on, but this stuff was there. Always confused me. It always sparked my interest, to say the least. And then that solution of presence. Who knows what that stuff would mean? But my friends, that is it. Like, if I keep going on, this will just spiral out of control and get too long. There's hundreds more of them, and I could talk about them for ages. I find them endlessly fascinating, and there's so much depth to them. And look, even getting a small group of them and really working with them, you can pull together quite an interesting meta story, and that's really what you're looking for. As I showed you at the start, that whole idea of like you understanding yourself as fighting to get into the festival kingdom and all that. Once you can pull stuff like that out, it can be useful for thinking things through, if that's even valuable. Like, again, I must end all this in a sort of a redundant note, but say taking a lot of action is your first order, and trying stuff like this is something you sprinkle on top of, a very, very heavy action-orientated routine. So one very prominent part of what is happening here is we're accessing our right brain. Dreams come from the unconscious, whatever, but you can think of it the most simply as like what you consider you is like your evil left brain that has gone off and has like autistically trying to take over your world and has categorized everything and has convinced you that you understand everything and is trapping you in this kingdom that you think is your palace, but it's actually a prison, and you're struggling to break out of it. And to break out of it is to leap into this imaginative world and see all the potential and power this has. And so the dreams are raw expressions of that, and they teach you about the way your mind works that people are so bad at tuning into. For example, when it comes to storytelling, the ideal way you want to tell a story is by putting a dream in someone's mind. So most people try communicate, try persuade, try convince by telling, logical statements, straightforward stuff, explain, where the better way to communicate is most certainly down the realm of trigger the right brain, send an image, send a dream. This is why mythologies come to us as stories, very visual stories. This is why religions work this way, is because they take eternally abstract and difficult concepts and make them memorable and simple to digest, and that's the cause of their popularity. That's why they work. People are moved by images. People are moved by things that they can imagine. Now, to learn this skill, to study how dreams work and the part of your mind that dreams come from, gives you an immense power over your mind and over people's as well, over other people's. It's quite a dangerous skill, because if you look around your world, you'll see that, all the bad people are utilizing this. Like, a lot of people don't like capitalism. Capitalism runs off irrational persuasion. Advertisements are all about taking your mind, taking your mind and putting you in a dream, and then like subtly making you buy into a lifestyle so that you start buying a product or something like that. It's all there. Once you learn how this works, it's like that movie where the guy puts on the glasses and then suddenly you can just see the reality of what's happening going on all around you. This is the ultimate form of communication. It's the best thing that you can do in order to improve your ability to move people and reach people, but also to move yourself, to go inside your own soul and wrestle with difficult things such as your emotions. This is what I find so fascinating about it, is that not only does it move others, but it moves you. And that actually makes perfect sense, because the ability for you to articulate your emotions is the thing that I think most people lack. And I would call it emotional intelligence. Most people feel something, but they can't understand what the feeling is trying to tell them. They get led by their emotion in some sense. But really, you need to go down and understand and visualize and imagine what this feeling is actually asking you, something like your resentment or your envy. Most people feel it, and what happens is their left brain, because there's an earthquake under the kingdom, the left brain starts to point towards the source of the envy, because the left brain is stupid, and it points to the source of the envy and goes, there's a demon, I hate that person, I want to kill them, I resent them, I want to hurt them, fuck them. But what the right brain, the more, we could say, the more magical mind, what the dream mind would understand is that you need to go down into the earthquake, dive down into the deep, and see that envy is actually it's unsettled because it wants, it sees its potential in the person it envies. It sees how you could be that much better, and in some sense you could visualize perhaps your envy as a wounded child of some sort, or your own wounded pride, like you saw in the movie Star Wars, where they take off Darth Vader's mask and he's an old man, he's old, he's decrepit, he's weak. All that rage, all that darkness, all that evil was actually hiding something wounded and sad. And so if you can dive in and do that, you can and storytell to yourself what your envy might be saying. And then when you feel it, make the connection that this is the story that's coming up. And then you're starting to think in the way that the ancients used to think, in their sort of dreamlike reality that we see in their myths that we just can't understand. But most importantly, it becomes functional, and you can start working with that stuff yourself. And then, as I said, you can start applying this stuff to others and move them towards the light, towards the good side of the force, towards goodness. Don't be naughty. Don't be a bad boyo. And so all of this stuff circles around the sort of right brain, triggering the artistic way of understanding things, triggering the ability to use the imagination, and fundamentally getting a grip over the dream mind to unlock potentialities and skills that you have, and they're quite easy to get, only that you've never tried to find them, despite the fact that they happen to you every night. So if you're interested in learning all this stuff off me, you can go down to the link. I'll put one in the description, and I'll drop one in the comments, and hit me up for a consultation, and we can talk about doing some work. Thank you very much, people. I will talk to you next time.